Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me on my webinar that focuses on supporting EAL students with reading and writing. My name is Leanne Brownell, and I am the EAL consultant with HRCE. If you have any questions after this webinar, please feel free to email me at lbrownell@hrce. Thank you. So, as many of you know, the EECD has released the 6 pillars of effective reading instruction, and it focuses on oral language, phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, reading fluency, and comprehension. So this is just linked to the slide deck for your information. We will touch on all of these components throughout the webinar. This webinar is solely based on this text, which is highly recommended. It's Reading and Writing with English Learners, a framework for K-5. However, I will say there's a lot of great information in this text about supporting students that have literacy needs. So I took this page out of the book because it highlights some of the main beliefs that we have when we are working with EAL students, specifically focusing on the reading and writing. So I just want to reiterate that these students need multiple opportunities to be practicing their reading and writing and to be exposed to different opportunities for listening and speaking with their peers. It's also very key that we acknowledge the importance of literacy in any language and how valuable that can be, as it is probably the number one support skills. And with that, it's very valuable to tap into their home language in support of learning English. As we've learned a lot over the past number of years in terms of being culturally relevant and acknowledging the diversity in terms of cultures and linguistic abilities in our classroom, it's very crucial that students see themselves reflected in their classroom. So whether that be the books that you choose, the decorations on the walls, they need to see themselves reflected in their classroom. We talk about students having choice in what they're reading and writing. This improves their level of engagement, and they need a lot of time to be practicing with their reading and writing. And of course, all of this can't happen unless they feel safe and valued within their classroom, because when that is in place, then they are open to learning. So learning to read and reading to learn. So there is a significant shift that happens around the 4th grade. So when students are learning to read, they focus on decoding words, making sense of what those words mean, and they also focused on memorizing sight words to decode text more quickly. However, as they progress in their reading abilities, they will begin to use reading as a tool for learning new information. And this means that when they encounter unfamiliar words in their reading, they will look them up in a dictionary or ask for someone who knows more about the topic. So I have linked to another resource that talks about more in depth the shift between learning to read and reading to learn. So what is the relationship between reading and writing? So first of all, I want to point out that oral language is the foundation or the necessarily building block that is going to support students in further developing their reading and writing skills. So when students are learning English, they must develop these simultaneously, while English speakers already have that foundation of oral language. So it's kind of like putting all of these pieces together at the same time. But I think the important thing here is that we realize that listening and speaking and developing that oral language is what's going to help them further develop their reading and writing skills. So the connection between reading and writing cannot be understated. There's a very strong relationship between an ELL's reading ability and their writing ability in English. And as students gain vocabulary and grammar structures from reading, they will begin to apply them in their writing. So as we all know, reading is the most important skill. It supports them in their writing, it supports them in their vocabulary development, it supports them in their academics. And reading is the number one way to actually grow vocabulary. So once their reading becomes stronger, it then is a skill that is transferable to their writing. So for an overview of today, we're going to look at different literacy approaches, and then we're going to dig in a little deeper into the readers and writers workshops and looking at how these are structured and how they support students learning English. So I do have this in the slide deck, and there is a link to a PDF version of all of these different approaches. Just so if you are new to teaching early literacy skills, if you're new to EAL or you're a new classroom teacher, you've got a quick reference that can help you keep it straight. I'm not going to go through it all now because we will be touching on each approach throughout the webinar. So what exactly is the workshop model? So the workshop model includes a mini lesson, teacher reading aloud, shared reading opportunities, guided reading groups, and then independent reading. But not all components are used in one day. The writing workshop also includes a mini lesson, an opportunity for the teacher to be modeling the writing process. And then students will have an opportunity to engage in the planning process, editing, creating a draft, and then editing and revising it, and then publishing their work. So they're actually seeing it through to completion, and they're participating in all steps of the writing process. And throughout each step, they are receiving support and ongoing instruction from their teacher. So how the workshop model will support students learning English. So this is very much a process that follows a routine. They become familiar with the use of language because the language is, again, repetitive. It offers the students a choice. And as we touched on in the introduction, choice is very important because it means that maybe these students are familiar with a topic or they're interested in a topic, and it just sort of increases the level of engagement. They're a little bit more connected. It provides an opportunity for small group and individual instruction. And then it also gives the teachers an opportunity to tap into the strengths and the prior knowledge that these students are coming with. And it gives them an opportunity to work a little bit more closely with the teachers so that they can actually share what strengths they are bringing to the classroom. So this is just an example of what a workshop would look like. It does recommend 10 to 15 minutes of whole class explicit instruction. So that would be, the teacher is doing the actual teaching. And then there would be independent time. So this is 40 to 50 minutes of reading and writing. So you could do this individually. The students could work in partners. At this time, depending on levels, the teacher might be conferencing with students. They could be working in small groups, or they could have that opportunity to be meeting individually. I guess I said that with conferencing. And then there will be an opportunity for sharing. So in the final part of the class, then they share what they've learned. So they could share with a partner, with a group, or with the class. It's really up to you. And you can shake things up a bit and do different things. I do know that the times can be adjusted based on your schedule. I know that everyone's schedule is different, and there's interruptions in terms of music and library, and high school classes might run differently. So that's just kind of a breakdown of timing. So you can make it work for your own schedule. So each approach has a different sort of level of student responsibility. And so a quick kind of way to remember is I do, we do, you do. So I do as the teacher, we do as a group, you do as the student. So we are gradually releasing responsibility to the students. So examples of I do, meaning the teacher, that will be the teacher is instructing, delivering a mini lesson, doing read alouds and write alouds. So this is very explicit and modeled. So you are giving examples, you are modeling the process, a thinking process. Students are able to, I guess I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when we talk about read alouds, they're being exposed to what a fluent reader sounds like. When we talk about write alouds, we're thinking about, we're watching the teacher and their thinking process in terms of what goes into becoming a good writer. So word choice, changing your ideas, changing the sequence of how things go. The we do is when the teacher is working with students for shared reading or guided reading or shared writing opportunities. So this is structured and supported by the teacher. And then the you do is when the students are working independently, and the end goal being that it becomes a natural thing that they do, and it's automatic. So they generate their own ideas, they're understanding a little bit more, they're making sense of the text, they're able to work a little bit more independently at their level. So we're going to focus on mini lessons. So what exactly is a mini lesson? So the point of the mini lesson is for the teacher to introduce a skill, a concept, or strategy to the whole class in a short, focused period of time. So again, we look at the I do. So this is when the teacher is modeling and giving explicit instruction. The mini lesson format is you're going to make a connection. So you're going to bridge new learning to what has already been taught. So this is just when you're activating prior knowledge. So you're reminding them, you're getting them to think back, to reflect on what they already know, what they've already been taught. Then they're going to move into teaching the new concept through direct, explicit instruction. So this is when you're modeling the skills or strategies that they need to be focusing on for the lesson. And then there's a level of engagement. So this is when the students are going to be practicing what has been taught in the mini lesson, and it gives them an opportunity to interact with peers. So whether that be with partners or with groups. And then there's going to be a link. So you're going to explain and remind students of the significance of what they have learned and how it will be useful to them. And this is a piece of transferring of knowledge. So what can it look like? So maybe you are working with the class to create an anchor chart. Please remember to include visuals. Going to use sentence stems, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's giving them the vocabulary to support them in, it's like a structure or a scaffold to give them the language that they need to be participating in conversations. You can have a structured conversation, and it provides an opportunity for peer interaction. So the goal of the mini lesson is not to give an assignment for the day, but it's about introducing students to strategy that will become part of their reading repertoire. So as they're reading, they have, strategies that they can pull from to support their understanding or to support their writing. So when we talk about using the QSSA, for the point of this webinar, I don't know if we have time to watch this video, but I highly recommend that you go to the 13-minute, 45-second mark and you will see an actual EAL class and how that teacher is using the QSSA strategy. So this is guiding a structured conversation among students. So first, you're going to give them an open-ended question. So not a yes, no, not a question that has a very literal answer, but something that causes them to have to think. So then you're going to give them a signal. So you're going to say, when you have your answer, put a thumb up, raise your hand, put your hand on your head. And then you're going to give them the stem or a sentence frame. So, in my opinion, or according to the text, and then they have to give evidence. So it really depends on what you're asking them. And then, so you've posed the question, you've given them the signal that when they're done, what to do, and you've given them the stem on how to appropriately answer the question. You will then give them time to share with a partner or in groups. And then the fifth part, the final part, is you're going to assess. So you can then randomly call on students. Maybe you'll take volunteers, and then that's your opportunity to be checking for a clear understanding. And then they're, engage in a conversation, maybe clarify any misunderstandings that the students might have. So I do just want to reiterate that after you pose the question, the signal is once they have an idea of what their answer might be, and then you give them the stem. So it's giving the students a little bit of time independently to think through what is being asked and to come up with an answer or an idea of what they would like to share. And then once they have signaled that they're ready, then you give them the stem and the opportunity to share. All right. We're going to focus on read alouds now. So a read aloud is when the teacher reads a text aloud to the students. There's different ways to do this. You can give them individual copies, or you can put it on a screen for all to see. Sometimes individual copies of books are a little bit difficult, so putting on the screen for all to see is a great way to really support all students. The point or the benefits of a read aloud is it exposes students to what a fluent reader sounds like. So they're exposed to what words, excuse me, what proper pronunciation of words, the appropriate speed and intonation, reading with expression. It also builds vocabulary, which again will support comprehension. And this does not include students ever reading. So read aloud is not popcorn reading or read around the room. It's this teacher modeling fluent reading. So, is it still appropriate to read aloud to a middle grades? Absolutely. And so why? Well, because it gives students the opportunity to be exposed to texts that are above their independent level. Again, it's great to hear them. It's great to give them the opportunity to hear what an actual excellent reader sounds like. They're being exposed to proper grammar and language structures. It's further developing their vocabulary and in their academic vocabulary. They get the conversational piece rather quickly, but as the academic piece, it's the academic vocabulary that they struggle with. And so by doing read alouds, they're exposed to richer, more academic vocabulary. And hopefully it will instill a love of reading in our students. So what are some things you should consider when you're doing it? Well, you want to come up with you want to read something that's very interesting and relevant to the students. Very important to have read the book or the passage before you read it to all students. When you're reading aloud, it's important to model thinking as you read. So this is an opportunity to be modeling, making inferences, making predictions, really looking at maybe how has a character changed. Maybe if you're doing nonfiction, Maybe you're going to be looking at nonfiction text features. And then you can provide class discussion time to talk about what has been read. So how exactly do they support students learning English? So um, it's great if you can incorporate the use of visuals if they're not on the screen. If you come across some vocabulary that's not typically used in everyday context, maybe you want to take an opportunity to pre-teach some important vocabulary. Uh, giving students the opportunity to get together with one another, whether it be partners or groups, and talk about it. It's giving them exposure to multiple genres and, again, choose something that's culturally relevant. So Valentina Gonzalez, the author of the book that this webinar is focused on, quotes, "Reading aloud to students is planting seeds, seeds of vocabulary, language structures, writing, grammar, and independent reading. And then as you continue to provide them with read alouds, all of these things listed above, vocabulary development, fluent reading, making sense of the text, it will all develop and grow and progress. So don't underestimate the power of a read aloud. All right, we're going to move into shared reading. So when you are going to do shared reading with students, it is important that the text be slightly above their instructional reading level. And if you're involving the whole class in reading a text together or small group, it's important to be practicing the reading the texts together. And of course, you are guiding the shared reading opportunity. Everyone must have access to the same text, and you're going to read the same text for several days, but throughout, at each opportunity to read the text, you're going to be looking at different teaching points. So are you going to be focusing on letters, letter sounds, patterns, punctuation? Maybe you'll want to focus on some comprehension strategy. So are you going to make predictions, teaching them how to refer to visuals? Maybe you'll do some work with prefixes and suffixes. Or you might want to focus on reading with fluency and proper stress and intonation. So if you build on all of these things, after several days of working with the same text, becomes easier, and it's a great support for all students, especially students learning English. And you don't have to just limit it to fiction texts. It's a great opportunity to be exposing students to different genres. So biographies, poetry, comic strips, how-to instructions. When you are doing nonfiction texts, you might want to focus in on some of the nonfiction text features that can support students' understanding. You can also use this text to become a model for writing. So maybe it's going to be an idea for them to write something similar. Maybe they're going to write a response to what they have read. So maybe they want to do a book review, or they want to summarize, or maybe there's a connection. So again, there's multiple ways that you can use this text to then as sort of a bridge to a writing activity. So what can shared reading look like? So everyone reads from the same text. You can use different kinds of text. So as I just mentioned, it's a great way to model proper language structures and fluency. You can do shared reading as a small group or whole class, and secondary students benefit from this approach as well. I think oftentimes when you get to secondary, you think that these approaches aren't necessary, but they're so valuable. And you just choose an appropriate text, and is a lot of impact on students' reading and writing ability. And again, use multiple books and texts to teach skills. So don't keep using the one book over and over and over again. After you've done, you've worked with the same text for a couple of days, then you're going to choose another one and another one. And then over time, you're going to increase the levels. And again, it's going to support all of these strategies that students need to be explicitly taught. It's also going to give them opportunity to be practicing these strategies as well as developing their vocabulary. It also gives them the opportunity to be working with peers, which is where they really get a bulk of their vocabulary. We're going to look at guided reading now. And so what does guided reading look like? So this is when the teacher meets with a small group of students that are at a similar reading level. The students read the book aloud simultaneously, but not in unison. So that means they're not to be reading chorally, so all reading the exact same words at the exact same time, but they can they can read quietly, and you're going to be focusing on each reader. So the teacher can provide on-the-spot targeted instruction, and there would be time built in for word work that would be connected to the text. So oftentimes, and I will speak as an EAL teacher, we might not be using sight words or letter sounds that are connected to anything. And it's far more successful if you are connecting sight words and phonics instruction that is connected to a text that the students are reading, because it's making it far more meaningful. The recommendation for guided reading is 3 to 5 times a week for 30 minutes, and group sizes can be 4 to 5 students. And what would the format of the lesson look like? So again, the book must be at the instructional level, so it's not too easy and not too difficult. When you're working with EAL students, it's critical that you do a book walk first. So you might want to review some of the vocabulary. So what is familiar and what is new to them? Can you have a quick little conversation around the book? Do they know anything about this topic? And then you can give an overview or a very brief summary of what the book is about. So while the students are reading, the teacher is going to listen to each student one at a time and listening for any errors or confusions, and then be working on comprehension strategies. Now, we do have to find a balance when we have to make error corrections, because we don't want to be interrupting all of the time to the point that it really interferes with the flow of their reading and maybe discourages the student. So we might just want to, pay attention. Are they making repeated error? And that might want to be what we focus on, because sometimes when they are new to English, they can tend to make a few errors. And so we don't want to discourage them by interrupting and calling out every error. But if you notice that maybe they're pronouncing ed as a double syllable, so ask it, jump it, maybe that might want to be your focus. Maybe your focus might want to be reading all the way to the end of the word, so that they're including the s or the ing. Maybe you want them to be practicing on reading with intonation and not so word for word. So I think that's something to be mindful of when you are supporting students in their reading, is just to kind of focus on maybe one or two areas and not every error that they make. And then after reading, this is when you are able to discuss the text and what strategies the students were using. And you can also fix up any errors or confusions, and then also take that time to reinforce proper reading strategies. You can review vocabulary, you can talk about what connections the students have made, and then you want to do some word work. So you want to look on letter sounds, blends, word families, and possibly give them a writing task. I do have a link here to a great resource that was done by one of the P6 literacy consultants with HRCE. And it gives you, for each level of text, for your leveled readers, it gives you examples of word work. I don't want to go too fast. It will be linked in the slide deck. It gives you examples of different word work activities that you can do for the different levels of text that the students are with. So that's a great, great resource to have. All right. So the importance of, hold on, did I skip a slide? No. All right. So this is going to give students an opportunity to find books that match their interests. It's going to give them time to talk about the books with their groups. And then it's also an opportunity to model proficient reading and hopefully develop a love of books. Independent reading. Okay. I have to apologize. This is the infographic for independent reading, which is coming up. I wish I put this slide after my heading. Anyhow. So, what is independent reading? Reading on their own for self-selected books daily for 10 to 30 minutes. However, it says 30 minutes, not in our context. That's specific to EAL teachers. We're not going to be reading independently. Students won't be reading for half an hour. And when it is independent time, this is the opportunity to be meeting with students, monitoring their progress, and giving them feedback. I can't underscore enough the importance of independent reading time. So if you have EAL students in your class and your class is reading for half an hour, this is the time that is meant to be meeting with students and reading individually with them, talking about their reading strategies, talking about their progress, and giving feedback. So whether you do that one-on-one or with a group, but this is the opportune time to be connecting with students on a more sort of intimate basis, I guess. And so very valuable, because this time that you are spending with a small group or an individual is what's going to inform your practice for upcoming lessons. And when you are following, I guess, all pieces of this reader's workshop or reading workshop, reader's workshop, you're giving students an opportunity to be reading and speaking about what they are reading. And this is, is what really supports their vocabulary growth. So you can work with, while independent reading is happening, you can be working with small groups, providing direct instruction. Set a purpose for reading. So are they going to, at the end of it, turn to a partner, give a summary? Are they going to be making a connection to what they've read? Are they going to be looking at different word families that maybe they had done a lesson or two before? So what is the focus of their reading? We also want to improve their stamina, so their ability to stay focused and be reading for longer, reading more. And then at the end, we want to give them a few minutes again to be talking about what they're reading, because again, this is a chance to be practicing with their English and being exposed to authentic English. And like I've mentioned, you might want to even use this time to be focusing on some comprehension. Maybe you want to touch on a little phonics lesson, even monitoring book choice. In the beginning, if you have the option to provide a book in a home language, this is also very recommended practice. Okay, now we're going to move into the writing, starting with write alouds. So what is a write aloud? So this is when the teacher is modeling writing and they're verbalizing their thoughts. So they're talking through the process as they go. So it's up to you how you would like to do this. It could be on chart paper. You could be doing it in a Google Doc, on the LCD, on the whiteboard. It is, worthwhile mentioning that you will be doing a fair amount of talking. So it's also important to balance that out with giving the students some time to talk and discuss with their peers. After you have kind of written a model piece of writing, then you're going to have the students read. So this is not a lecture, and you're not to have something that was already written as your example. That would not be appropriate. So you're actually you're writing for the first time in front of them. So they need to see and hear what exactly is happening during the writing process. So you're going to want to use high frequency words and vocabulary so that they can make sense of what you're doing and what you're talking about. But then it's a great opportunity for you sprinkling in new vocabulary to again build their word bank. It's important for students to see, and for all students, not just EAL students, that writing isn't always easy. So it's good for them to see you trying to generate an idea, be modeling how to refer to a word wall or what to do when you get stuck. Be thinking about word choice. Is there something better out there? Is my word choice a little bit awkward? And kind of going through that process. And also looking at proper punctuation. And so, again, just like with reading, it's important to choose a focus of your instruction. So, you might not want to be doing every single aspect of this in one mini lesson because that would just be confusing, but to really own in on one or two of these things. They also can see a connection between the sound of words and the words on the page. So, this is a great opportunity for them to be connecting that words that they speak are then words on a piece of paper. Okay. Um, it's also important to give students an opportunity to turn and talk so they can talk about word choice, they can summarize what was written. If they have any questions, this would be a great opportunity to ask. Sometimes they feel a little safer with a partner or a small group. So if there's something that they didn't understand, it's a great opportunity to give them to be talking kind of in a safe, smaller group. So anything really could be modeled. You could model your morning or weekly message, and then you can ask students about, is the capitalization proper? What about my word spaces, paragraphing? It's less intimidating. You're not just handing students a piece of paper and saying, write about your weekend. It's authentic learning opportunity for them to see someone be writing in real time and the thinking process that goes into it. And you can have the passage to be as short as long as you want. But this is something that you should get in the habit of doing on a regular basis. There are two sort of different beliefs on making errors. One side of the coin says, yeah, you should embed a few errors in your writing so that they can see you go back and maybe do some editing. And then others would say, no, please make it error free. So I guess that's up to you, kind of what party you sit with. And then it's important for students to, get together and talk about their topics of writing before they start writing independently. All right, so shared writing. So what exactly is shared writing? So this is when the teacher and the students will create a text together. So there's two different ones that I've mentioned here. There's the language experience approach, which I highly, highly recommend. And I think we'll touch on it in depth shortly. And then there's interactive writing. And so this is valuable for all stages of language proficiency, whether they're a very beginner level student or whether they're kind of at the intermediate level. So beginners, when you're doing the shared writing, they can be exposed to something as basic as alphabet, forming letters, the letter sound connection. And maybe you're going to be focusing on the concept of print. So, the direction that you read, your return sweep, going back to the bottom, the next line, focusing on what is a letter, a word, and then a sentence. So there's different things that come with concepts of print. Vocabulary development. This is your opportunity as a teacher to be providing them with richer words. And then there's the phonics piece as well. I really can't say enough about developing their vocabulary. We see a lot of students kind of just plateau at this transitional level of like level J to P, I guess you could say, and they just get stuck there for a very, very long time because their academic vocabulary is not developing at the same rate that their conversational English did. And so they might be able to decode these words, but they don't know what they mean. And when they don't know what words mean and they don't have the strategy to kind of determine what they mean within the context, they are not understanding, and therefore it's just cyclical. It affects their grades and all that. So really kind of beefing up our vocabulary instruction is what the students need to support them in the content areas. And then students should be able to read the text that they were involved in writing. So again, making it at their level. So we're going to touch on the language experience approach. So in a nutshell, this is when you discuss a shared experience. So this could be something like, if you're doing a read aloud or you watched a video as a class, maybe there was a guest speaker or you did a group project together. So it would have to be a shared experience either with the whole class or with the group that you're working with. And what's going to happen is then the students are going to talk about their experience in their own words. And as they are sharing their ideas, the teacher is writing their thoughts down kind of verbatim. So at this point, the students are connecting their spoken language to the written language, and they're actually seeing their own words that they said on, a screen or a piece of paper, what have you. Once the text has been completed, then what happens is the teacher will read it aloud. Then they will choral read as a group. They can practice in pairs, and then they will be left to do it independently. Okay. The teacher will guide the students in identifying specific words and help them develop reading skills, such as, reading for meaning. What does that word mean in context? Looking at phonics, sight words, punctuation, what have you. And then they can use what was created through this approach as an exemplar for their independent writing. So again, love this approach and think it is so, so valuable for students to actually make that connection from the words that they are speaking to the fact that they become written down on a page. So interactive writing is the teachers and the students both write. So the students write the words that they know, and then the teacher writes down the unknown words and corrects misspelled words so that they can use it as an example. So maybe they're working together, the students have an idea, the teacher's writing it, the student's writing it, but when they get to the point that they have the words, but they don't know how to write it, this is when the teacher would jump in and be writing. So it's kind of a give or a take. And then again, the teacher reads it, they read it as a group, read it as a partner, and then practice on their own. Very, very important that shared writing is not writing answers down on a worksheet. It's not passing a piece of paper. So you write a sentence and then the next person writes a sentence and then you develop some wonky story that doesn't make any sense at all. That is not what it is. It is also not putting students in partners and having them write down a conversation. That is not it at all. And again, I have the second part of the language experience approach. I guess the previous video, flipping back to earlier with the QSSA, the teacher then slides into using the language experience approach. So again, this is linked in the slide deck. So what does independent writing look like? So this is when students have the opportunity to write on their own on a topic of their choice. So not even necessarily a prompt. And then they're going to be working through every part of the writing process. So they're going to plan, they're going to be using, they're going to be generating their own ideas. They're going to be working with graphic organizers. They're going to write a draft. They're going to go through the edit and revision pages. So looking at spellings, punctuation, capital letters, and then revising for Does it make sense? Is it in proper sequence? Did I use the same word too many times? Is there a better, richer word that I could use? And then they're going to publish their work and share it. So this really gives the students an opportunity to engage with all of the processes, learn about what happens at each stage, and then actually seeing something through to completion and having that sense of accomplishment because they started something and they finished it. To support students in with their independent writing, please provide them with word banks. Maybe they need sentence stems or paragraph frames. I have some examples coming up. And it's important that teachers know we're not waiting for students to learn English to start writing. So again, because they don't have that oral language foundation, they are doing all 4 strands all together. So it does need to be supported and scaffolded with all of the things that we've discussed to this point. It's a false myth, or it is a myth, I guess a myth is false, to think, well, they don't have enough English yet to start writing. Not true at all. So when students are writing independently, this is again similar to independent reading. It is giving the teacher time to be conferencing with students. So whether you want to do that with an individual or a small group, it's up to you based on the needs in your class. But students do need to have time and choice and be given the opportunity to work with the teacher and get feedback on where they are in their writing process. And like I just mentioned in the previous slide about, actually completing something and feeling a sense of accomplishment, they really take on ownership of their own work as they're seeing it kind of blossom into sort of a fuller piece of writing. So during the mini lesson, they're taught how to evaluate their own writing. So thinking about, looking at spelling, word choice, details, and punctuation. And in the early stages of students' writing, we're just going to accept it as is. So if they're still using invented spelling, that's important that they're able, they're starting to practice with hearing and recording sounds. And then they're going to slowly start to learn how to spell using different spelling patterns, I should say. So these are some of the things that we can be focusing on. Again, if you're sitting down, it's much like listening to students read, and if they're making errors, you're only going to focus on 1 or 2 of them at a time. Similar to their writing, you're not going to take a piece of students' writing and highlight every error that they made. They're going to shut down, they're going to become deflated, and they're not going to really be paying attention to any type of instruction. So really just be focusing in on 1 or 2 of their errors and accepting it as is and kind of celebrating that success. Writing is one of the hardest things to do in English for EAL students. So we want to be supportive of that and kind of celebrate some of their small successes. So what are some recommended activities? So we've got a document here that highlights some strong literacy activities. So we've got Elkonin boxes. How can you make and break words? So again, we've got different ways to make and break up words. How to do analogies, my pile, your pile, a sentence patterning chart, the picture word inductive model. Again, along with the language experience approach, this is another one of my favorites. So you're going to take a visual and you're going to give students a word bank and provide them maybe with sentence stems. And so you're going to label the image together. So you would start with literally just labeling, I guess, the objects in your picture. So you can see this is color coded. So starting with blue, those would be the nouns. We talk about the wolf, the bear, the bush, the turtle, etc. And then you're going to build on those. And what is the wolf doing? What is the squirrel doing? And again, be using synonyms. So the wolf preys. The wolf is going to hunt the deer. Okay? The raccoon consumes. The raccoon eats the turtle eggs. So it's showing them how to label. It's showing them what a label does. It's showing them some nouns. It's showing them you could be sounding some of these words out. You could be doing spaces between your words. You could be doing academic vocabulary with sort of that more clearer language for some of these words. And giving them sentence stems. So I see a wolf. I see a turtle. And maybe they are going to be using some of their home language supports. And then they can orally share their sentence with a partner. And then maybe you want to take it a step further and be writing a paragraph about what is happening in this image. So again, this is a fantastic model for classroom teachers and for EAL teachers alike. We have to keep in mind that a lot of students, regardless of their background, academic vocabulary is a huge issue. And so this is something that will be applicable to all students and very beneficial for EAL students. Another great link from this webinar, from the slide deck that you'll have. And then I think I just have some videos. Sorry. Oh, let me go back here. And then these are just, sorry, videos based on the activities that have been recommended. Some of them here, and analogies and my pile, your pile, there wasn't anything available, but the other videos are highly recommended. Okay, and if you're interested, Carol Salva is kind of an EAL guru. She does a lot of work with students who come from refugee background that may have experienced interrupted learning, or they have never attended school, so they would have some unique needs in terms of transitioning, in terms of literacy ability. So these are some recommended resources from Carol Salva. And that is it. So I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to join this webinar. I hope you are able to download the slide deck and go through some of the linked resources from this. Very valuable suggestions and activities and instructional practices. So again, if you have any questions, please email me at lbrownell@hrce.ca. And again, my sincerest thanks for the work you're doing to support students learning English and just trying to improve on your practices. Thank you.